Hey, welcome to this RSPA Education session, Firewall Configuration. I'm Mark Heaston, Senior Leader with Channel Marketing with WorldPay. I'm joined today by Nathan Sweeney, who's Senior Security Consultant at Secure Ideas. Welcome.
Thank you.
Nathan. The series really is intended to cover some important topics, especially the series that we're doing, Nathan and myself, on security is very important to the industry and something that you and your staff should benefit greatly from. As one of the big benefits of RSPA membership, you get free legal advice, contracts and agreements, important information on the EMV shift, and then there is a fantastic portal, the Member Business Resources portal, that includes hundreds of documents that are available for managing your business, including customer contracts and agreements, internal and employee documents, security PCI resources, a lot of content on EMV, including webinars that have been recorded and saved for you, videos, white papers, learning tracks that are of use, and of course information on security. Over the course of the next few months, especially with this as a good strong foundation for that, additional information on security will be made available to you. So that repository of great information as a part of your membership is going to get deeper and greater over time. So if we don't mind, let's kind of jump into the topic of firewall configuration. Nathan, what is it? What is firewall configuration and why is it important?
Right. So most people are used to the term firewall, right? They know what that is. They may not necessarily know what that means, what that device does. It's a device that I had to pay for. It sits on my network and it lets me get on the internet is kind of the gist of most people's knowledge. Firewall actually does a lot of different things. There's a router in there that helps traffic get to the internet. The firewall itself actually restricts access, so only certain traffic can get to where it needs to go. You tend to have a lot of other services and stuff like that that are built into devices today. The idea of firewall configuration is that we want to be intentional about making sure that we've set up these devices securely, because they're the gateway to the internet. You think about the security of your front door and your back door, whether or not you have cameras and whether or not you have an alarm system and that kind of stuff. The firewall is your gateway to the internet. So you're potentially vulnerable to 6 billion people on the internet. So when we talk about firewall configuration, our goal is to put secure configurations in place and to put secure processes in place to help restrict that access and make sure that the traffic going in is what we want and the traffic coming out is what we want.
Got it. And are there, I think we were talking about this before, are there tools that I can use to help simplify that process?
Yeah, so there's a wide range of devices out there. You've got, the old classic Cisco. They've been around forever and they're well known. You've got a lot of newer devices. I say newer, they've been around for a while now, but kind of next gen firewalls. You've got companies like Fortinet and SonicWall. A lot of these that they provide a lot of neat add-on services. Then you've got lower level stuff like Linksys and Netgear and some of these more consumer grade routers that maybe don't have all the same functionality. Each of these have different levels of functionality and configurations that you can access. Some of the larger ones have like overall management systems. So for instance, if you're a merchant that has a large fleet of Fortinet devices, you can purchase the Fortinet, I can't remember what it's called. Fortinet has a configuration tool that allows you to monitor and manage all of your devices. SonicWall has something similar. Cisco has something similar. So there's a lot of different tools, but it really somewhat depends on what you have deployed in the field.
And so when we think about security in general for merchants and the security solutions that are deployed by the resellers, right? Where does firewall configuration, where does kind of the routers and the firewalls, where does that kind of fit into that overall ecosystem?
Yeah, so for a lot of people, configuring the firewall it's something that happens once, right? When you're doing the install, you set things up the way the merchant wants it to be done, and then you walk away and that's it. A lot of people don't think about the continuing process of what happens after that. The problem is most merchants they're not a static environment. They add devices, they change what they're offering to their customers, they knock down a wall and rearrange a room, stuff like that. And so the network is changing, the devices on the network are changing, that configuration needs to change as well. And resellers need to be cognizant of what is happening with that merchant and be that resource to be able to help make those changes in a secure fashion.
And do you have recommendations in terms of the language that I use as a reseller to help make this more accessible and understandable to merchants? Again, we've talked about this before. Merchants, I sell coffee. And yes, I get it that technology is important for me running my operation. The point of sale solution is super important for me managing inventory, timesheets, payments, etc. How can I, as a reseller, make it really easy and accessible for you to understand the importance of firewall configuration and what it means for protecting my business?
Right, right. As a technical person, I tend to cringe when people use the word firewall because there's so much more than a firewall. You know, traditionally a firewall was a separate device, and now it's all built in. But it really, especially during the sales process and during merchant relations, I think it's important to I don't want to say dumb it down, but to really dumb it down to a level that is simple. You're simplifying it so that they can understand easily. This is the firewall. Some people call it a router, but really the firewall is the key component that we're worried in. Most of these devices have several core components. They all do routing of some sort. They have a NAT router that allows traffic to go between different areas. They have a firewall. It should be a stateful firewall. Some of the lower end stuff don't have the firewall portion, but really that's designed to say this traffic can get from this area to this area, but not to this other area. Some other areas, they need to have the ability to segment networks. That should be a core functionality so that you can say this network over here is different from this network and they can't communicate. We'll talk about that, I think, a little bit more later. And then they all should have some ability for logging. Like those are kind of the core components that all of these devices, these firewalls should have.
And I think you're alluding to this. We're kind of naturally flowing in terms of the answers to the questions. But what are the components of the modern firewall? Right?
Well,
and why are they important? I mean, you've kind of touched on that a little bit, but are there other things that need to be added to that?
Yeah, so with a modern firewall, sometimes they call them a next-gen firewall. There's a lot of different terminology, sales stuff out there. In addition to those core components, a lot of companies have started adding things in. So for instance, you have things like content filtering, right? So that you can provide a service so that any of your merchants that are accessing the internet, they're restricted in what they're able to access and they're protected from getting to malicious stuff. You've got companies that have added in things like gateway antivirus that tries to block malicious traffic coming in and out. You got things like intrusion prevention systems, VPN tunneling, and there are a lot of different options out there, and every company is trying to throw something else in to show that they have a better offering than the other. But really, they all come down to the same core functionality.
Talk a little bit more. You touched on it, but the segregation. So I've got a lot of different systems, a lot of different networks that are all tied in, or that are all tied together. Why is segregation important?
Yeah, that's a great question, and this is probably one of the most important things to be aware of when we talk about firewalls. So different systems have different levels of risk, right? Your point of sale server that is maybe the credit card server that all the terminals talk to, that takes in more money than your cash register in most of the times, right? Your cash drawer is going to have some cash, but in most places, they're taking more via credit cards and debit cards and all that kind of stuff that are going through that system. So that's a very significant amount of risk that's going through there. However, the manager PC that may be plugged into the same network that the guy, the manager comes in and he checks his email and, he may be doing business work on there, but it has nothing to do with point of sale. Like that is a much lower area of risk, right? It's actually riskier. Like he's doing things that are higher risk on it, but we care about it less because, let's be honest. If his email gets compromised, that's a frustrating problem. But as long as they're not stealing credit cards, we don't care. So the idea of segmentation is we want to segment off these systems, and we want to be able to put these systems on one network and these on the other network and completely keep them from being able to talk to each other.
Got it. It makes a lot of sense. Again, thinking about how I talk to the merchants, how I talk to my clients or my customers today. So what do the merchants need to know when third-party changes happen, right? When there's any sort of I think we were talking before, if my internet provider comes in and they make some changes and they're changing out components of my system, what are the things that I need to, as a merchant, be aware of just to make sure that I haven't kind of opened up or reconfigured my system in such a way that I've either now exposed it to some level of risk or kind of prevented kind of the overall maintenance and management of it?
Yeah. So, and again, this comes back to a lot of resellers think, hey, I put this device in and it runs, and as long as the merchant doesn't complain, I'm good to go. But we know that those environments change; they're dynamic. A very common situation, kind of like you alluded to, there is, the merchant decides, hey, I'm tired of paying Cox so much money for this internet. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to get a DSL line from AT&T. Well, that's fine, but now the guy that comes in from AT&T that sets it up, he sees all this complex networking stuff and these secure stuff, and he doesn't know how it works, and he gets frustrated. He asks the merchant, and the merchant doesn't know. So he says, okay, I'm going to replace all this with this cheap default router that we use, and I'll make your internet work. From the merchant perspective, everything is good, right? They're still processing credit cards, the internet works, but now they've opened themselves to a significant level of risk because they don't have all those secure configurations. They don't have those extra security controls that maybe they're paying for. So part of the job as the reseller that we talked about is that education of the merchant, helping them understand, hey, we're putting this device in here. Here's the stuff that's running on it. You don't have to know the details of it, but you need to understand that nobody else should mess with this, right? If we're gonna service this for you, you switch ISPs or you have somebody come in and add a new camera system or whatever, give us a call. Let us help you set it up securely so that you know it's being done right.
So I like that because what it does is it establishes me as a continuing trusted advisor, right? So I'm a trusted advisor. I'm going to educate you on security and why it's important for your business. But then over time as well is I'm creating a reason for the merchant to come back to us. Hey, look, I just changed my internet service provider. Can you guys help make sure that I haven't opened my business up to some level of risk? So you're being brought back in, and probably at that point as well, I would assume there's been changes in technology. There's reason for me to educate you and update you again.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's a great opportunity for that reseller to get in front of the merchant and have FaceTime, because when your technicians nowadays are doing so much more remotely, that merchant starts to lose track of, why am I paying you all this?
Yeah.
So one of the things that we used to do when we were at TCR is every time you go on a service call, it doesn't matter what you're there for, clean out their printers for free, because printers get jammed up and it's a hassle and it's frustrating and they get annoyed. Take 5 minutes and clean out the printers. There's little things like that you can do like that when you're on site, and check their system and say, hey, look, we noticed this other device that wasn't here last time. Do you know if it was set up securely? Like, do you mind if we check the configuration and make sure everything's good? Those are things that you can do that provide real value to that merchant, and it reinforces that idea that, hey, this is a trusted advisor.
Right. This is a relationship that we've got, and so
Yeah.
you need to take advantage of the opportunity to reestablish that.
Yeah. I'll add on that too. Like this changes happen and people don't account for it. This happens to all levels of merchants. The Target breach a few years ago, I don't know if you know what happened there. It was a heating and air company that managed heating and air systems in Target. They had remote access into their systems, and an attacker was able to use that remote access and then jump over onto the point of sale systems because that segmentation wasn't in place.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this isn't, hey, this is attacking just small people. This happens to everybody.
Let's see. Any tips for handling wireless? Is there anything unique about wireless that you'd recommend is kind of factored in?
Yeah, absolutely. So wireless is one of those protocols that I love to hate. It's so useful. It's made our lives so much easier. We all need wireless for different things now, but it also brings in a lot of risk. When we talk about securing a physical network, I have to gain access to a device or a network jack in your facility in order to attack the network. But with wireless, now you're opening it up to, I might be able to set a mile away with a directed antenna and access your network. So we need to be really careful about how that's secured. There's different ways of doing that with different devices, but ultimately it comes down to segmenting off the different levels of risk, right? If you have to use wireless for your point of sale system, I recommend don't. If you can get away with it, don't. But if you have to, have one wireless that's just set up for point of sale, a separate wireless maybe that's set up for customers, maybe a third wireless that's set up, that manager that wants to set out at the table in the restaurant and do his normal management stuff. Maybe he doesn't need to be on the point of sale network. He just needs access to the internet. So, find out what the devices support and segment the networks in different ways so that you can control what's going where.
Question. Okay, we talked about this a little bit. Is like, especially for the resellers, may be interested because they're going to get some pushback from time to time, undoubtedly on the router that's being used. Look, I can go get one at the local, store that's a lot cheaper maybe than what you're providing me. So how do I have that discussion, the how and the why my router is better for protecting your business as a reseller than the thing that you might just pick up, either from your ISP or from the local store?
That's a great question. Ultimately what we're coming down to is the difference between a consumer grade model and a more enterprise level secure model. A great example. I've got a zip line in my backyard for my kids, and I built this rickety old stand so that they can climb up and jump on the zip line. It works great for them. They're comfortable using it. I'm comfortable with how they use it. I would never put that in a public playground and let 1,000 other kids roll on it. You know, there's different levels of security. The same type of thing. The router that I have in my home network, I'm not going to put in my business because I understand that there's more risk there, right? If my home network gets compromised, it might be a bad deal. But if my business gets compromised, that's a really bad deal. Yeah. So, you know, consumer grade models, you know, like the low end Linksys, if you go to Walmart and spend $40 on a router, you're getting a device that was made to be as cheap as possible and to be as competitive as possible. It wasn't built with security in mind. It may have security settings, it may have some limited amount of controls, but it's kind of like getting your oil changed at Walmart. They're going for the bottom dollar. You know, when you get a more commercial grade device that is designed to be a security device, those are built with security from the ground up. So every piece of it, every component of it, every setting is built with consideration of how does this affect the entire security model. So there's a lot of value there that maybe isn't on the surface.
And then we've talked a lot about PCI. What does PCI say about firewall requirements? What kind of requirements do they have?
A lot. So the entire PCI, PCI there's 200 plus individual requirements that are split into 12 sections. The entire first section is all about your firewall, and there's a whole bunch of subsections that go in there. One of the most important that people need to realize is that it requires that you deny all traffic in and out of your network, except for that which is required for your business. So if you require, connecting to whoever your payment processor is to process credit cards, that traffic needs to be open. But you being able to connect to Gmail to access your email, that does not need to be open. So in setting that up, there needs to be considerations of, hey, how much do I really have to have open? Are there more secure ways of doing this? There's a lot of other requirements, and it's very important for resellers to go through the PCI guidelines, the DSS, and understand how do these come into play. There's things like content filtering and VPN access and stuff like that. So there's a lot there to dig into, but it's not as complex as it sounds.
Are there any good companies that you recommend that are particularly strong on this subject?
Yeah, so we have 2 RSPA members who do a great job of this. If resellers don't want to do this themselves, if they want to be able to outsource this to a third party, there's a company called NetSurian, and they basically come in as a third party and they manage that device. So during the setup and install, the reseller works with the merchant and says, here's our standard, here's our configuration, needs to be how we set it up. They provide that information to NetSurian, who goes through and configures the device, and then they put it on site. They manage it, they monitor the logs, they do the updates, that sort of things. There's another RSPA member called Millennium Digital Technologies. They do the exact same thing. One of them uses Fortinet, one of them uses SonicWall, but overall their services are very similar. So a lot of resellers have found value in allowing these companies to manage that portion of it so that they don't have to have expertise in-house to make sure they're doing it the right way.
Nathan, thank you very much for going through this with us. It's a great topic, very important. If any of the viewers are interested in learning more or going deep, because we talked about this very technical subject,
Yep.
and an opportunity to go very deep, go to graduate level education or understanding about this, what do you recommend? What's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
The easiest thing they can do is they can email me at securityadvisor@gorspa.org. If they don't if they don't remember that, they can also go to our website, just www.gorspa.org. If they're a member, in the member section, there's a Ask an Advisor section where they can fill out the form with whatever details. It'll shoot me an email. We can also maybe schedule a phone call and get on the call and do that kind of stuff.
Great. Well, and I would encourage anyone watching to reach out to you to do that. I think it's been very insightful in our conversation today. Well, Nathan, thank you very much for being here.
Thanks a lot, Mark.